Hello, dear friends. My name is Vasyl Pekhnyo. I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and I invite all of you to watch this latest update on Ukrainian battle map situation as of October the 23rd. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel where you watch it, and leave your comments below. Today, I have some good news, and that's the great news that I have good news, because we all need to hear something positive, and today is the time when I will say it. So please stay with us till the very end.
So the main positive news concerns what is happening in the Dobropilya direction. You can see Kucherev Yar was still marked in red on the deep state map as of yesterday. Now we can already say that it has become a blue zone because the soldiers of the 132nd Separate Reconnaissance Battalion showed footage of them raising the flag over the settlement, the Ukrainian blue and yellow flag over Kucherev Yar. Russian occupiers had been surrounded there for a long time. It was one of the centers of the so-called, thank you, one of the three cauldrons. In fact, the Russians were here, right in Kucherev Yar, and according to the 7th Corps, a total number of them managed to be withdrawn from there. The soldiers who are now working here are part of that unit. From the 132nd Separate Reconnaissance Battalion, a total of 50 occupiers surrendered and were taken prisoner. Our soldiers also have additional footage showing those very Russian occupiers being led into captivity by our troops. Can you even imagine that? If 50 of them surrendered, by the way, they were actually surrounded and held captive there. To be more precise, they had been surrounded there since August 15th until yesterday, October 22nd. Well, obviously, this officially became known a bit earlier. The release happened. But from August 15th to October 22nd, that's 2 months and 7 days, basically 2 months and 1 week. The Russians were trapped in the pocket for 9 weeks. This is for those skeptics who were writing things like, so where are your kokols? Or more precisely on kokols, where are your cauldrons? Especially for those skeptics and Russians who were talking about these cauldrons. Well, here you go. The fate of this cauldron ended with 50 occupiers surrendering as prisoners. But just imagine how many of them there were here if 50 surrendered without waiting for food or water. Reinforcements from their own troops, well, there actually were reinforcements, but for the Russians it all ended badly and sadly. If 50 surrendered as prisoners of war, that means there was quite a large group of troops here. Just think how many resources they burned through for this village in Donbass, and what kind of work was done by our soldiers. Well, it's actually hard to imagine. It's really, really a lot. This, in fact, is the answer to the skeptics. There is good news in the Dobropilya direction. Further south, in the city of Myrnograd, which is part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, yesterday, the soldiers of the same 7th Air Assault Corps published it. The press service of the 7th Corps, the Air Assault Forces, published a mechanized assault that took place, a mechanized attack that was carried out against our troops' positions in Myrnograd. According to the 7th Air Assault Corps, which is responsible for this defensive position, as well as for Myrnograd. And for Pokrovsk, all enemy equipment that was used in this assault was destroyed. The confirmed number of eliminated occupiers is 18 people. That is, our troops managed to eliminate 18 occupiers. As for whether any remnants of the landing force actually managed to land on the outskirts of Myrnograd at that specific moment, it is still not known for certain today. I think more detailed information will appear later, but as of more or less as of last night, as far as I know, there were no enemy forces in either Myrnograd or Pokrovsk, at least during that specific period yesterday evening and night. Yes, the enemy, especially now in Pokrovsk, is trying to infiltrate here to move into Pokrovsk from the southern and southwestern outskirts. It's not for nothing that this has been happening lately. These gray wedges, specifically gray in color, have appeared. It's important to emphasize this. Not red, but gray. The gray zone in the south of Pokrovsk. It's actually quite wide. In reality, it's even wider, even larger than what is marked on the deep state map. But this is exclusively a gray zone, not an area under the control of Russian occupiers. Because as a zone of control, strictly speaking, you can't really call it that here at the moment. It simply isn't one. As of now, the 7th Corps is protecting those infantrymen, but the enemy is still infiltrating. They disguise themselves, as I mentioned, and physically locate our firing positions. Well, let's see how things unfold from here. It's a very difficult situation, but in fact, it does have a tendency and a chance to be corrected. Just like in Kupiansk, by the way, based on the latest events that I know of, what can't be discussed. Of course, it's too early to talk about it now, but there are certain signs in Kupiansk as well. There are prospects for the situation to improve. The same gray zones are already reaching essentially up to Kostyantynivka, because here, from the direction of Alexander Shultein, as you can see, it's quite a rather wide gray zone has formed in the direction of the settlement of Kostyantynivka. If we mark the boundaries of this settlement, you'll see where these boundaries end, or rather where they begin, and the gray zone starts. And so it has come right up close to Kostyantynivka. Now, certain markers are already appearing, geolocation markers, which make it possible to assert that the Russians, a few days ago, a separate small group, which in fact managed to cross the dachas called Yahidka. This is right here on the approaches to Kostyantynivka. Once again, here are its boundaries, and on the approaches to Kostyantynivka. In the southeast of Yahidka, the Russians passed through and entered the very edge. The eastern quarter of Santorini, as it is called, is completely destroyed, an utterly devastated quarter. And now, dear friends, I will give you the exact geolocation marks so you can see where the Russian occupiers were detected. So it's right here. There is footage showing them being destroyed at this point on the eastern outskirts. But for now, well, yes, we can talk about the expansion of the gray zone, about breakthroughs. Separate groups of occupiers near Pokrovsk. There are even reports of the start of fighting. Oh Lord, for Pokrovsk, for Kostyantynivka, about the possible beginning of battles, even for Kostyantynivka. But globally, for now, this does not change the essence. The issue of gray zones is characteristic of completely different locations along the front. Pokrovsk, Myrnograd, Kostyantynivka. Finally, Lyman, the same story. Vast gray zones where the enemy tries to infiltrate, but our forces, especially UAV operators, detect and destroy them, Kupiansk as well. The situation there is worse than in the previously mentioned cities. There are red zones held by the occupiers. Right now, they are trying to block it, so the war has undoubtedly changed. It is also changing in terms of how even the defense perceives it, as well as the geolocation tags themselves, where the enemy is, what is happening with them. Right now, the enemy would very much like to make a statement on the informational front as well, just as they have done before. Through the words of Saldo, Volodymyr Saldo, the occupation head of part of the seized Kherson region. So just the other day, he supposedly claimed that they had already started fighting for Kherson, but that's absolute nonsense. In reality, that's not true. The Russians are not on the right bank of the Kherson region, and they have not started any battles for Kherson. Moreover, just yesterday, one of the units of the armed forces of Ukraine, a unit specializing in unmanned systems, called themselves the Dog Trackers, which is a really cool name, by the way. By the way, they're acquainted with the guys, and they also share their videos while working here on the left bank, in the left bank part of the Kherson region, and destroying those enemy forces that are trying to move to the right bank. So the dog trackers in Oleshki found the enemy and tracked them down. They saw how the enemy was unloading their ammunition in one of the buildings near the former factory in the city of Oleshki. Well, the 406th Pelieri Brigade really gave them a hard time at the spot where they were unloading their ammo, and now no one is advancing anywhere. Here are, in fact, the footage of the destruction. Let's take a look. The footage of the destruction, how it burned this ammo depot that the dogs, the scouts, are showing. My God, what a funny name. And the flames, and really a wall of fire, a wall of smoke as a result of this strike in the Oleshki frontline area. This was an advanced ammunition depot belonging to the occupiers, which they obviously intended to use to terrorize Kherson. But the good news doesn't end there. Today is quite an interesting day. It continues with the fact that yesterday, starting at night, actually for 2 nights and in the evening, data was already being reported. And while videos appeared showing that our Ukrainian drones attacked the city of Chelyabinsk, friends, just imagine that. Chelyabinsk is next to the city of Kopeysk, and it was precisely there that the strike was delivered. In the background, you can see the flash of flames from the arrival of the Ukrainian UAV. Here is a closer view of the strike, and you can see a column of fire and smoke rising as a result of the hit. This is the plasmas plant in the Chelyabinsk region in Kopeysk. This plant produces plastics, of course, but its secondary purpose is the creation and manufacturing of munitions for field artillery, naval artillery, and for tank and self-propelled guns.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
This production covers calibers from 76mm to 152mm. And what's most interesting, actually, in this whole story with Chelyabinsk is, first of all, the distance. I calculated that to the Chelyabinsk region, I'll just show it on the map so you can get a rough idea. Guys, look where the Chelyabinsk region is and where Ukraine is. So Ukraine is right here at our far northeastern borders, and the Chelyabinsk region is over here. That's insanely far away, insanely far. I measured it on the map, and the straight line distance is about 1,800 kilometers. This means that our drones obviously struck from more than 1,800 kilometers away, because drones fly in a sort of zigzag pattern to avoid enemy air defense systems, anti-aircraft missile or anti-aircraft complexes. So this is clear confirmation that we have long-range capabilities that allow us to strike targets up to 3,000 kilometers away. And so they delivered this strike. The second most significant aspect isn't the range, but rather the emotions of the local population, who were truly stunned by such a flight. Those are the words of this commentator, the guy who witnessed the arrival. Well, it's just pure delight, something worth watching and showing in the review of the battle map. Look, your attention, friends, to the screen.
The clouds, right there in those clouds, just like that, drifting gently, just like that. An explosion occurred.
Awesome. It's, well, a perfect assessment of this attack that took place there. Now, moving on to the block of certain international political news, which without a doubt also deserve coverage even in the battle map review format. Of course, today it's not about the map, but about some news that should be noted. Yesterday, the Ukrainian delegation, together with the Ukrainian president and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, announced at a joint conference that Ukraine will receive from Sweden up to 150 JAS-39 Gripen fighter jets are available. This is the most advanced modification. Sweden is the manufacturer of Saab, the producer of these aircraft. This is the most advanced modification of this aircraft, but there is one caveat. We're talking about, well, some sources mention 150 units. According to my information, it will definitely be no less than 100. Next, the relevant memorandums will be worked out between the countries and agreements will be signed. Among other things, this is currently being handled by the proper preparation and further support, let's say, by the military wing of the president's office, headed by Colonel Palisa. They are, in fact, working precisely on developing the relevant memorandums and agreements in which Ukraine will finance the production and Sweden will manufacture. Of course, this won't happen today or tomorrow. This is for the future. In 10 to 15 years, however, this will mean a complete rearmament of the Air Force, specifically with modern elements, with Gripens. In the near future, as some say, we might receive slightly older models of Gripens, but that's not the worst scenario either. Besides that, let's share some more insider information. There are actually certain rumors that we might be able to use on our aircraft, integrating not only long-range American air-to-air missiles, but also certain others. European models, from which countries exactly, I won't say, but without the knowledge of the US. Very soon, we might see missiles that will start driving away Russian aircraft and KAB carriers, which currently pose a truly fantastic threat to our front lines. I was literally talking about this just recently. Now, I have some insider information that these missiles exist. The Americans have no influence over them, and this is fantastic news. They are not related to the Gripens. Basically, they concern the fact that a certain radicalization has taken place in Europe, and perhaps this radicalization even pushed the Americans to the point that yesterday the Wall Street Journal published an article stating that the US has allowed, or rather lifted, a key restriction on Ukraine's use of long-range Western missiles. First of all, we're talking about Storm Shadow missiles, which, let's say, had certain safeguards. The US has lifted these, which will allow, firstly, an increase in the number of long-range attacks, and secondly, to increase their, because these missiles contain American technologies, and up until now, the Americans had blocked the full range of capabilities of these missiles at a certain technological level, which are supplied to us by the UK and France. That's why there are now reports that improvements in the use of Storm Shadow missiles are expected in our war. And finally, I'll even mention the statement made by the US Secretary of the Treasury. Although we treat such announcements with great caution here, Scott Bessent, the US Secretary of the Treasury, said last night that sanctions are about to be, firstly, imposed against the Russian Federation, significantly strengthened, and accordingly they will provide a certain against the Russian Federation. That is, the US is imposing sanctions against the Russian Federation. It's interesting, to say the least, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. We'll see whether they actually follow through in the end, or if it's just empty talk and chatter. Although the Russians deserve to have only sanctions maintained against them, what they are doing is deliberate, and it's clear and obvious that they are trying to destroy Ukraine's critical energy infrastructure. I think that neither Europeans nor Americans would want to see a Ukraine that is freezing in winter or late autumn. that is facing very serious challenges in the energy sector, because the Russians, for example, if we look at the map of the approximate flight paths of missiles and drones that took place during the attack from October 21st to 22nd, that is from the day before yesterday to yesterday, it is clearly visible here that the main targets were facilities on the left bank of Ukraine. In other words, the Russians are clearly trying to destabilize the balance between the left and right banks, separating the left bank of the Dnipro from the right bank. The point is that, as analysts from Telegraph explain, a significant portion of Ukraine's thermal and hydroelectric power plants are concentrated on the left bank. If they are destroyed, this will lead to a critical shortage of electricity will arise, which is supposed to, among other things, make the population more susceptible to capitulation sentiments and probably also weaken the country's overall defense capability. That is, the Russians are trying to depopulate all the territories they want to integrate into themselves, namely the left bank of Ukraine. They see all these territories as ones that now need to be emptied of people, and they consider this the key to success. We'll see. This tactic of the occupiers does make sense, and analysts and security experts predicted that, unfortunately, we might face certain energy problems on the left bank. We are already encountering them. In fact, many Kyiv residents I know are experiencing very long power outages today. I think there will be such outages in other cities as well, but we are used to this. So, friends, let's stay strong. And thank you for your attention. Take care of yourselves. All the best. Goodbye.